Essay questions. E1. The Declaration of Independence asserts that all men are created equal. In what sense does the declaration mean that are all human beings equal? Explain how it is self-evidently true that all men are created equal. Use examples to illustrate your explanation. I think it has to do with how there are no obvious traits that make one person more fit to rule than the other. Compare to the worker/drone/queen bee how they have specific traits that correlate to specific jobs. Unlike humans, we do have natural inequality x, parents and their kids. We also all have the same rights, life, liberty, and pursuit of happiness. We have political equality, meaning we are entitled to have consents of the government's rules upon us. Self-evident in that there are no clear physical differences that defines each one role in society. E2. Federalist 10. Define faction and give examples. Explain in detail using examples and illustrations the reasons why Publius argues that a large republic is better at preventing majority tyranny than a small republic. Be sure you can explain the arguments for both small and large republics. Faction, a group of citizens united in an interest that negatively affect the interests of the community. Groups that pursue policies that are unjust and/or ineffective. Argument for small, more likely to have uniformity and equality across the nation. Less conflict due to similar religion, wealth etc. But bigger is better because with a bigger and heterogeneous republic several groups of people can be satisfied. Example from class about farmers, bankers, and manufacturers. In the end more people end up happy and minority isn't ignored. It is less likely that only one specific group is the majority with large republic. Promotes diversity, people with different interests, more coalition forming. E3. Explain at least 2 advantages and at least 2 disadvantages of federalism. Give your own specific examples to illustrate each. Advantages of federalism. Foster state loyalties. Practices pragmatism. Considering the size and diversity of the U.S. might be easier to control if power is given to local officials. State and local officials are closer to the problems of their areas. Creates laboratories of democracy. State government can experiment with policies and other states can learn from their successes and failures. Leads to political stability. By removing the national government from some contentious issue areas, federalism allowed the early U.S. government to achieve and maintain stability. Encourages pluralism. Federal systems expand government on national, state, and local levels, giving people more access to leaders and opportunities to get involved in their governments. Ensures the separation of powers and presents tyranny. Even if one person or group took control of all 3 branches of the federal government, federalism ensures that state governments would still function independently. Federalism, therefore, fulfills the frame's vision of a governmental structure that ensures liberty. Disadvantages of federalism. It could promote aristocracy, limited control over people. More talented people leave local to go to national. States are left to fund their own health care which can also lead to competition between states. Prevents the creation of a national policy. X. Think of how long it took to abolish slavery since it was a state issue. Basic principles of democracy. Monarchy. A form of government in which power is vested in hereditary kings and queens who govern in the interest of all. Oligarchy. A form of government in which the right to participate depends on the possession of wealth, social status, military position, or achievement. Totalitarianism. A form of government in which power resides in a leader who rules according to self-interest and without regard for individual rights and liberties. Direct democracy. A system of government in which members of the polity meet to discuss all policy decisions and then agree to abide by majority rule. Representative democracy/indirect democracy. A system of government that gives citizens the opportunity to vote for representatives who work on their behalf. Direct v. indirect election. Direct election, a system of choosing political office holders in which the voters directly cast ballots for the person or political party they desire to see elected. Indirect election, an election in which individual citizens vote for electors who will select a candidate. They don't vote for the candidate directly. They choose to put the decision in the hands of others. Republicanism. A government rooted in the consent of the governed, a representative or indirect democracy. Implied a system of government in which the interests of the people were represented by more educated and wealthier citizens who were responsible to those who elected them. Majority rule. The central premise of direct democracy in which only policies that collectively garner the support of a majority of voters will be made into law. Majority tyranny. When a majority takes action to thoroughly subjugate the minority. Popular sovereignty. The notion that the ultimate authority in society rests with the people. Political equality. The principle that all citizens are the same in the eyes of the law, equal opportunity in making and enforcing laws. Political liberty. A key characteristic of U.S. democracy. Initially meaning freedom from governmental interference, today it includes demands for freedom to engage in a variety of practices without governmental interference or discrimination. The Founding and the Constitution. The Articles of Confederation. 1. Basic structure. O Confederation of 13 equal states. OX, UN, United Nations, EU, European Union. O Legislative, 1 chamber. O each state, 1 vote, 1-year term/term limits. O 9 votes to pass most laws. O laws applied to states not individuals. O limited powers. O executive, none. O judiciary, none. 2. Major defects of the Articles of Confederation. O supermajority to pass laws. O weak enforcement. O no separation of powers. O untalented officials. AOC did not allow Congress to regulate commerce among the states or with foreign nations. Made no provision for an executive branch of government that would be responsible for executing, or implementing, laws passed by the legislative branch. Had no provision for a judicial system to handle the growing number of economic conflicts and boundary disputes among the individual states. Its failure to provide for a strong central government. A series of bad harvests kept farmers in debt and worsened the crumbling economy. Shays's Rebellion. 33. Shays's Rebellion. A rebellion in which an army of 1,500 disgruntled and angry farmers led by Daniel Shays marched of Springfield, Massachusetts, and forcibly restrained the state court from foreclosing mortgages on their farms. New Jersey Plan. A framework for the Constitution proposed by a group of small states. Its key points were a one-house legislature with 1 vote for each state, a Congress with the ability to raise revenue, and a Supreme Court with members appointed for life. Virginia Plan. The first general plan for the Constitution offered in Philadelphia. Its key points were a bicameral legislature, as well as an executive and judiciary chose by the national legislature. Great Connecticut Compromise. The final decision of the Constitutional Convention to create 2-house legislature, with the lower house elected by the people and with powers divided between the houses. It also made national law supreme. 3/5 THS Compromise, Fugitive Slave Clause. Each slave considered 3/5 THS of a person. Purposes of determining population for the representation in the U.S. House of Reps. Fugitive Slave Clause. A fugitive slave has to be returned from where they came from when they're captured. Basic structure of the U.S. Constitution, size of each branch, term of office, method of election/appointment, major powers. Article I, the legislative branch. All legislative powers in the Congress. And establishes a bicameral legislature, the Senate and House of Representatives. There are 435 elected House of Representatives divided among 50 states in proportion to their population. Members of the House are elected every 2 years and must be 25 years of age, a U.S. citizen for at least 7 years, and a resident of the state, but not necessarily the district, they represent. Each state has 2 senators. The method in determining the selection of representatives and senators and states determine membership in the House of Representatives. Enumerated powers, powers the national government specifically granted to Congress. Article 2, the executive branch. The authority to execute the laws of the nation. President's term of office is 4 years. Electoral college. Presidency to natural-born citizens. Commander-in-Chief of the Armed Forces. Authority to make treaties with the consent of the Senate. Authority to appoint ambassadors, other public ministers and consuls, the judges of the Supreme Court and all other officers of the United States. State of the Union address, report directly to Congress from time to time. Removal of president, treason, bribery, or other high crimes and misdemeanors. Article 3, the judicial branch. Establishes a Supreme Court and defines jurisdiction. To become a member of the Supreme Court one must have a presidential nomination. Senate must then vote on the member. Federal courts have the authority to decide cases arising under federal law and the U.S. Constitution. Supreme Court can settle disputes between states, or between a state and the national government. What provisions of Constitution actually meant? Bicameral legislature. A 2-house legislature. Simple majority. Supermajority. Congress may pass bills by simple majority votes. If the president vetoes a bill, Congress may override the veto by a two-thirds supermajority of both houses. A treaty may be ratified by a two-thirds supermajority of the Senate. Anti-federalists. Those who favor strong state government and a weak national government. Opposed ratifying the U.S. Constitution. Who? Small farmers, shopkeepers, laborers. Believed in the decency of the common man and in participatory democracy, viewed elites as corrupt, sought greater protection of individual rights. Wanted stronger state governments, closer to people, at the expense of the powers of the national government. Table 2.2, 47. Federalists. Those in favor of a strong national government and support the proposed U.S. Constitution. Who? Property owners, landed rich, merchant of Northeast and Mid-Atlantic. Elitist, saw themselves and those of their class as most fit to govern, others were to be governed. Wanted a powerful central government, Table 2.2, 47. Bill of Rights. Who demanded their adoption? The first 10 amendments to the U.S. Constitution, which largely guarantee specific rights and liberties. Madison demanded their adoption. Anti-federalists wanted the Bill of Rights adopted to protect their individual liberties from fear of having a strong national government. Checks and balances. A constitutionally mandated structure that gives each of the three branches of government some degree of oversight and the control over the actions of the others. Judicial review. Power of the courts to review act of other branches of government and the states. E.X. Jefferson tried to give the rights to the states in the Kentucky resolutions, but his cousin, John Marshall of the Supreme Court, proposed which gave the Supreme Court the power to decide if a law is or is not constitutional. Accepted as a result of the famous case of Marbury v. Madison. Process for amending the Constitution, Article V. Two-thirds of the House and Senate approve of the proposal and send it to the states for a vote. Then, three-fourths of the states must affirm the proposed amendment. The other method of passing an amendment requires a constitutional convention to be called by two-thirds of the legislatures of the states. That convention can propose as many amendments as it deems necessary. Those amendments must be approved by three-fourths of the states. Separation of powers, a model of government in which different parts of the government are responsible for different functions, legislative, executive, and judicial branches. 1. Explain the two main purposes for the separation of powers. Branch independence and checks and balance. 2. Explain how the Constitution keeps each branch independent from the others. Only the legislature has the authority to make laws, the chief executive enforces laws, and the judiciary interprets them. 41. 3. Explain the powers that each branch, leg, exec, and jud, possesses to check the other two. A legislative check on executive. I impeach the president. 2. Reject legislation or funding the president wants. 3. Refuse to confirm nominees or approve treaties. 4. Override the president's veto by a two-third vote. B. Legislative check on judicial. I change the number and jurisdiction of federal courts. 2. Impeach federal judges. 3. Propose constitutional amendments to override judicial decisions. C. Executive check on legislative. I veto legislation. 2. Call Congress into special session. 3. Implement, or fail to implement, laws passed by Congress. D. Executive check on judicial. I appoint federal judges. 2. Refuse to implement decisions. E. Judicial check on legislative. I rule federal and state laws unconstitutional. F. Judicial check on executive. I declare executive branch actions unconstitutional. 2. Chief Justice presides over impeachment trials, Chart 42. Federalism. Define federalism. What are the three elements to the definition? Federalism is when multiple governments exercise power and authority over the same people and the same territory. A political system in which there are local units of government as well as national government that can make final decisions on some government activities, and whose existence is specifically protected. O. Division of power across the local, state and national government. 1. Unitary, national government. States. 2. Federal, national government depend on collection of independent states. 3. Confederal, states on national gov. Advantages of federalism. Foster state loyalties. Practices pragmatism. O. Considering the size and diversity of the U.S. might be easier to control if power is given to local officials. O. State and local officials are closer to the problems of their areas. Creates laboratories of democracy. O. State government can experiment with policies and other states can learn from their successes and failures. Leads to political stability. O. By removing the national government from some contentious issue areas, federalism allowed the early U.S. government to achieve and maintain stability. Encourages pluralism. O. Federal systems expand government on national, state, and local levels, giving people more access to leaders and opportunities to get involved in their governments. Ensures the separation of powers and presents tyranny. O. Even if one person or group took control of all three branches of the federal government, federalism ensures that state governments would still function independently. Federalism, therefore, fulfills the frame's vision of a governmental structure that ensures liberty. Disadvantages of federalism. Prevents the creation of a national policy. O. The U.S. doesn't have a single policy on issues, instead, it has 51 policies which often leads to confusion. Leads to a lack of accountability. O. The overlap of the boundaries among national and state governments makes it tricky to assign blame for failed policies. Define and give an example of the following types of powers: delegated, implied, concurrent, reserved, denied. Delegated powers, those powers, expressed, implied, or inherent, granted to the national government by the Constitution. Examples of delegated powers include the power to regulate commerce with foreign nations, to collect taxes, to borrow money on behalf of the United States, to declare war and to enter treaties. The delegation of power refers to the distinct powers and abilities given to each branch of government. Denied powers, powers that the government cannot do, powers are expressly, silently, or inherently denied. Implied powers, powers of the national government derived from the enumerated powers and the necessary and proper clause. O. Look up examples. X. Having banks. Concurrent powers, powers shared by the national and state government. O. Tax, borrow money, establish courts, make and enforce laws, charter banks and corporations, spend money for the general welfare. O. X. Property taxes for schools and sales taxes on goods such as food and clothing. Reserved powers, powers reserved to the states by the 10th Amendment that lie at the foundation of a state's right to legislature for the public health and welfare of its citizens. O. Set times, places and manner of elections and appoint electors, ratify amendments to the U.S. Constitution, take measurements for public health, safety, and morals, exert powers the Constitution does not delegate to the national government or prohibit the states from using, establish local governments, regulate commerce within a state. O. Death penalty. Police powers. Police power is the capacity of the states to regulate behavior and enforce order within their territory for the betterment of the health, safety, morals, and general welfare of their inhabitants. Law for health, safety, and protection of the community. X. Drinking age. Supremacy Clause. The Supremacy Clause of the United States Constitution, Article 6, Clause 2, establishes that the Constitution, federal laws made pursuant to it, and treaties made under its authority, constitute the supreme law of the land. Full Faith and Credit Clause. Article 4, Section 1 of the United States Constitution, known as the Full Faith and Credit Clause, addresses the duties that states within the United States have to respect the public acts, records, and judicial proceedings of every other state. Privileges and Immunities Clause. The Privileges and Immunities Clause, U.S. Constitution, Article 4, Section 2, Clause 1, also known as the Comity Clause, prevents a state from treating citizens of other states in a discriminatory manner. Additionally, a right of interstate travel may plausibly be inferred from the clause. The major constitutional provisions important in the development of federalism. Popular sovereignty. The notion that the ultimate authority in society rests with the people. State sovereignty. The ability of the state to be independent and have autonomy and control over itself and its decisions. Nullification. The right of a state to declare void a federal law. Act of canceling something when one thing overcomes the other. Secession. Action of withdrawing formally from membership of Fed or body. Historical developments. Assertion of state power, secession. Popular sovereignty people state and national gov. State sovereignty people state national gov. Post-Civil War Amendment, 13th, 15th. 14th Amendment, Incorporation. Section 1. Guarantees equal protection and due process of the law to all U.S. citizens. Eliminated the distinction between rights and liberties of Americans as citizens of their respective states and as citizens of the United States. The court uses a heightened standard view of review known as strict scrutiny to determine the constitutional validity of challenged practices based on fundamental freedoms and other suspect classifications, including race, alienage, and national origin. Section 2. Representatives from each state would be appointed based on the number of whole persons in each state. Only male inhabitants of the state age 21 plus could be counted towards representation in the House of Representatives and could vote. Section 3. The Senate of the United States shall be composed of 2 senators from each state, chosen by the legislature thereof 2 for 6 years, and each senator shall have 1 vote. Section 4. Refused South's desire to have Congress forgive the Confederacy's war debts. Section 5. National citizenship and limit the state power to deny individuals their constitutional rights. Interstate commerce, business between states as well as international business. Intrastate commerce, business within a state, occurring within the boundaries of the states. Why did the balance of power between the federal and state governments shift decisively in favor of the federal government? Because the federal government has the fund and whoever has the gold make the rules. They are able to regulate any commerce because they can argue that it could potentially affect the national and international commerce. Necessary and proper clause. Elastic clause gives Congress the authority to pass all laws necessary and proper to carry out the enumerated powers specified in the Constitution. Trend of federal contributions as a % of total state revenues. Grant in aid, an amount of money given to a local government or institution to implement federal policy. Define and give examples of categorical grant, block grant, conditional. Categorical grant, grant that appropriates federal funds to states for a specific purpose. OX, health care for low-income and disabled Americans, pollution control, economic development, and law enforcement. Block grant, a large grant given to a state by the federal government with only general spending guidelines. OX, education and healthcare. Conditional, government grants for a specific purpose that cannot be spent on anything else. What are the limits on the federal government's power to put conditions on aid to states? Mandate. A command, indicated by an electorate's votes, for the elected officials to carry out a party platform or policy agenda. Unfunded mandate. Devolution. Give a concrete example of this policy. Policy to send programs and powers back to states with less national government involvement. Reagan, more block grants / fewer categorical grants, less aid to states. G.W. Bush, no child left behind. Preemption. A concept that allows the national government to override state or local actions in the certain policy areas. Political culture and public opinion. What are the 3 levels of public opinion and what characteristics distinguish them from each other? Fundamental beliefs, widely and deeply held core beliefs, equality, liberty, democracy, tolerance, free market system, religion. Political ideology, a coherent way of viewing politics and government. Liberal views. Economic, more regulation, more generous government benefits. Social, less regulation of personal conduct. Foreign policy, more dove, less military force, multilateral. Conservative. Economic, less regulation, less generous government benefits. Social, more regulations of personal conducts. Foreign policy, hawk, unilateral. Libertarian. Economic, much less regulation, less generous government benefits. Social, much less regulations of personal conducts. Foreign policy, mild dove, unilateral. Positions on specific issues and people of the day. Intensity, are they passionate about opinions, more informed? Latency, latent public opinion may be shared by a large group of people but it is inarticulate and not mobilized, however a person, Donald Trump, can mobilize these opinions. Saliency, does this issue matter to me? College education vs. retirement. Polling, representative sample, reliability, sample size, random sample, margin of error, confidence interval. Be sure you understand how to apply these concepts in assessing the accuracy of a poll. Representative sample, a small quantity of something that accurately reflects the larger entity. An example is when a small number of people accurately reflect the members of an entire population. Reliability, question wording and open-ended versus close-ended questions. Sample size, a subset of the whole population selected to be questioned for the purposes of prediction or gauging opinion. Random sample, a method of poll selection that gives each person in a group the same chance of being selected. Margin of error, a measure of the accuracy of a public opinion poll. Plus or 3% to get confidence interval. Confidence interval, a range of values so defined that there is a specified probability that the value of a parameter lies within it. Types of polls: public opinion, exit, tracking, push. Types of polls: public opinion, interviews or surveys with samples of citizens that are used to estimate the feelings and beliefs of the entire population. Exit poll, polls conducted as voters leave selected polling places on election day. Tracking poll, continuous surveys that enable campaign or news organization to chart a candidate's daily rise or fall in support. Push poll, polls taken for the purpose of providing information on an opponent that would lead respondents to vote against that candidate. Define intensity and salience. What effects do they have on political behavior? Intensity, how strongly people feel about an issue or politician measured by a scale. O, more likely to participate. O, intense voters can make up for quantity. Salience, the extent to which people believe issues are relevant to them. OX, minimum wage. How do the major sources of public opinion, i.e. family, schooling, peers, education, income, sex, race, religion, and region, affect people's views? Gender, women have a more liberal attitude than men about social issues, such as education, poverty, capital punishment, and the environment. Women's view about war and military intervention are more negative than men's. Race and ethnicity, differences in political socialization at an early age. Minorities are more likely to favor government-sponsored health insurance and immigration policies. Age, depends on the era in which we were born and our individual experiences. X, older people being affected by the Great Depression or World War II. Also affects how citizens view governmental programs. Religion, affects political beliefs and behaviors. Religious beliefs shape individual attitudes toward political issues. Family, peers, and school, communication and receptivity. Children, for example, learn of their parents' political beliefs even though these concepts may be vague. Joining Girl Scouts to try to influence more young women to participate and have a positive view of politics. School teaches children to respect their nation and its symbols. X, Pledge of Allegiance. Media, Internet, news, social media, 293 to 297. Gender gap, how do the views of men and women differ on issues of public policy? Gender gap, a term that refers to the regular patterns by which women are more likely to support Democratic candidates. Women tend to be significantly less conservative than men and are more likely to support spending on social services and to oppose higher levels of military spending. Gender gap in political knowledge appears to be affected by education, age, number of children, and marital status. 298.